This is the second part to chapter 23. Atticus rose, stretched, and yawned. It was not even our bedtime, but we knew he wanted a chance to read his newspaper. He picked it up, folded it, and tapped my head. "Let's see now," he droned to himself. "I've got it. Double first cousin. How can that be? 2 sisters married 2 brothers. That's all I'll tell you. You figure it out." I tortured myself and decided that if I married Jim and Dill had a sister whom he married, our children would be double first cousins. "Gee, Manetti, Jim," I said, when Atticus had gone, "they're funny folks. Did you hear that, Auntie?" Aunt Alexander was hooking a rug and not watching us, but she was listening. She sat in her chair with her work basket beside it, her rug spread across her lamp. Why ladies hooked woolen rugs on boiling nights never became clear to me. "I heard it," she said. "I remember the distant, disastrous occasion when I rushed to young Walter Cunningham's defense. Now I was glad I'd done it. Soon school starts. I'm going to ask Walter home for dinner. I planned, having forgotten my private resolve, to beat him up the next time I saw him. He can stay over sometime after school, too. Atticus could drive him back in Old Surrey. Maybe he could spend the night with us sometime. Okay, Jim?" "We'll see about that," Aunt Alexander said, a declaration that with her was always a threat, never a promise. Surprised, I turned to her. "Why not, Auntie? They're good folks." She looked at me over her sewing glasses. "Jean Louise, there is no doubt in my mind that they're good folks, but they're not our kind of folks." Jim says, "She means they're yappy, Scout." "What's a yap?" Tacky. They like fiddling and things like that." "Well, I do too." "Don't be silly, Jean Louise," said Aunt Alexander. "The thing is, you can scrub Walter cleaning him till he shines. You can put him in shoes and a new suit, but he'll never be like Jim. Besides, there's a drinking streak in that family a mile wide. Finch women aren't interested in that sort of people." "Auntie," said Jim, "she ain't 9 yet." "She may as well learn it now." Aunt Alexander had spoken. I was reminded vividly of the last time she had put her foot down. I never knew why. It was when I was absorbed with plans to visit Calpurnia's house. I was curious, interested. I wanted to be her company, to see how she lived, who her friends were. I might as well have wanted to see the other side of the moon. This time the tactics were different, but Aunt Alexander's aim was the same. Perhaps that's why she had come to live with us, to help us choose our friends. I would hold her off as long as I could. If they're good folks, then why can't I be nice to Walter? I didn't say you couldn't be nice to him. You should be friendly and polite to him. You should be gracious to everybody, dear. But you don't have to invite him home. What if he was kin to us, Auntie? The fact is that he is not kin to us, but if he were, my answer would be the same. Auntie, Jim spoke, Atticus says you can choose your friends, but you sure can't choose your family, and they're still kin no matter whether you acknowledge them or not, and it makes you look right silly when you don't. That's your father all over again, said Aunt Alexander, and I still say that Jean Louise will not invite Walter Cunningham to this house. If he were her double first cousin once removed, he would still not be received in this house unless he comes to see Atticus on business. Now that is that. She had said indeed not, but this time she would give her reasons. But I want to play with Walter, Auntie. Why can't I? She took off her glasses and stared at me. I'll tell you why, she said. Because he is trash. That's why you can't play with him. I'll let you know I'll not have you around him, picking up his habits and learning Lord knows what's. You're old enough of a problem to your father as it is. I don't know what I would have done, but Jim stopped me. He caught me by the shoulders, put his arm around me, and led me sobbing in fury to his bedroom. Atticus heard and poked his head around the door. She's all right, sir, Jim said gruffly. It's not anything. Atticus went away. Have a chew, Scout. Jim dug into his pocket and extracted a Tootsie Roll, and it took a few minutes to work the candy in a comforter wad inside my jaw. Jim was rearranging the objects on his dresser. His hair stuck up behind and down in front, and I wondered if it would ever look like a man's. Maybe if he shaved it off and started over, his hair would grow back neatly in place. His eyebrows were becoming heavier, and I noticed a new slimness about his body. He was growing taller. When he looked around, he must have thought I would start crying again, for he said, "Show you something if you won't tell anybody." I said, "What?" He unbuttoned his shirt, grinning shyly. "Well, what?" "Well, can't you see it?" "Well, no." "Well, it's hair." "Where?" "There, right there." He had been a comfort to me, so I said it looked lovely, but I didn't see anything. "It's real nice, Jim." "Under my arms, too," he said. "Going out for football next year, Scout. Don't let Auntie aggravate you." It seemed only yesterday that he was telling me not to aggravate Auntie. "You know, she's not used to girls," said Jim. "Leastways, not girls like you. She's trying to make you a lady. Can't you take up sewing or something?" "Hell no, she doesn't like me. That's all there is to it." "I don't care. And it was her calling Walter Cunningham trash that got me going, Jim. Not what she said about being a problem to Atticus. We got that all straight one time. I asked him if I was a problem. He said not much of one. At most, that he could always figure it out. And not to worry, my head is second about bothering him. Nah, it wasn't Walter. That boy's not trash, Jim. He ain't like the ools. Jim kicked off his shoes and struck his feet to the bed. He propped himself against the pillow and switched on the reading light. You know something, Scout? I've got it all figured out now. I thought that about a lot lately, and I've got it all figured out. There's four kinds of folks in the world. There's the ordinary kind like us and the neighbors. There's the kind like the Cunninghams out in the woods. Then there's the kind like the ools down in the dump, and then the Negroes. What about the Chinese and the Cajuns down yonder in Baldwin County? I'm in Macomb County. The thing about it is, kind of folk don't like the Cunninghams. The Cunninghams don't like the ools, and the ools hate and despise the colored folks. I told Jim if that was so, then why didn't Tom's jury, made up folks like the Cunninghams, acquit Tom in spite of the ools? Jim waved my question away as being infantile. You know, he said, I've seen Atticus pat his foot when there's fiddling on the radio, and he loves pot liquor better than any man I ever saw. Then that makes us like the Cunninghams, I said. I can't see why Auntie... No, let me finish. It does, but we're still different somehow. Atticus said one time the reason Auntie's so hipped up on the family is because all we've got background and not a dime to our names. Well, Jim, I don't know. Atticus told me one time that most of his old family stuff's foolishness because everybody's family is just as old as everybody else's. I said, did that include the colored folks and the Englishmen? And he said yes. Background doesn't mean old family, said Jim. I think it's how long your family's been reading and writing. Scout, I've studied this real hard, and that's the only reason I can think of. Somewhere along when the Finches were in Egypt, one of them must have learned a hieroglyphic or two, and he taught his boy, Jim laughed. Imagine Auntie being proud her great-granddaddy could read and write. Ladies pick funny things to be proud of. Well, I'm glad he could, or who'd have taught Atticus and them? And Atticus couldn't read, you and me be in a fix. I don't think that's what background is, Jim. Well, then, how do you explain why the Cunninghams are different? Mr. Walter can hardly sign his name. I've seen him. We're just about reading and writing longer than they have. No, everybody's got to learn. Nobody's been born knowing. That Walter's as smart as he can be. He just gets held back sometimes because he has to stay out and help his daddy. Nothing's wrong with him, Jim. No, I think that's just one kind of folk. Jim turned around and punched his pillow. When he settled back, his face was cloudy. He was going into one of his declines, and I grew wary. His brows came together. His mouth became a thin line. He was silent for a while. That's what I thought, too, he said at last. When I was your age, if there's just one kind of folk, why can't they all get along with each other? If they're all alike, why do they go out their way to despise each other? Scout, I think I'm beginning to understand something. I think I'm beginning to understand why Boo Radley stayed shut up in the house all this time. It's because he wants to stay inside. That was a really deep chapter 23 from the wonderful book here, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Now, Scout is younger than Jim, and Scout sees the world a little bit more positive, and Scout's wondering why she can't hang out with the Cunninghams because they're supposed to be like less than her. And then Jim said he's put a lot of thought into it, and it's because them, the Finches, his family, him and Scout's family, they're educated. They can read and write. Atticus is very smart and taught them how to read and write. And the Cunninghams, they can barely spell their name. The Cunninghams aren't as bad as the ools, and the ools think they're better than the colored people. But there's like a caste system that's like unspoken of. But the one thing that I don't agree with, and Jim even takes it back to Egypt time. He's like, oh, back when we were in Egypt, our ancestors were in Egypt. They must have taught their kids hieroglyphics and got passed on. That's not necessarily the truth, because myself, obviously I read really well. Nobody taught me how to do this. My father, he was a college professor, but he never even spoke to me. He was a horrible man. He's a terrible person, very abusive. He used to beat us with a belt. And I'd compare him a lot more to Mr. Ool than Atticus Finch. My father was nothing like Atticus Finch. So, he didn't teach me one single thing, and he didn't want to either. He's a horrible person. I learned this on my own. I had a few good teachers growing up, and I also, on my own read a lot, and did this on my own. So, it's not necessarily your background. Who we are as individuals has a lot to do with nature, how we are when we're with our genes, but also nurture too, and how we're nurtured and stuff. And you may have had a bad childhood and a bad parent, but that doesn't mean that you also have to grow up to be the same way. You can't break that chain. And you can do that by learning from positive examples. And I can't think of a better example to learn from than Atticus Finch in all of American literature. The person in this book he's a great testament on how you should treat people and how you should be a father, in my opinion. So thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Feel free to put any comments down in the comment section. I love reading those. And thanks again for watching.